The morning was already buzzing with energy when she arrived at the cafe. The smell of fresh coffee and baked pastries filled the air. Mixing with the chatter of regulars and the hum of espresso machines, she slipped behind the counter with practiced ease, tying her apron and checking the order boards. It was going to be a busy day, but she liked it that way. She liked seeing things move fast, hearing the laughter of customers, and keeping everything in order. Even when chaos seemed to be taking over, the first few orders went smoothly. She moved with a rhythm, taking cups from the barista, delivering steaming plates, and checking on tables. Her colleagues called out to each other, laughing and joking in between tasks. She smiled politely, focusing on her own duties, but keeping an eye on everything happening around her. Being observant had always helped her, especially in a place like this, where small mistakes could quickly turn into big complaints. It was in the middle of the rush that she noticed him. He walked in with an air of confidence, carrying a briefcase in one hand and a tablet in the other. His suit was perfectly pressed, his shoes shined, and there was something about the way he moved that immediately set him apart from the usual customers. People around him seemed to notice too, giving him a wide berth as he found a table near the window. There was a quiet authority in his presence that made conversations lower their volume slightly. As if the room itself acknowledged he was someone important, she approached his table with a warm, professional smile. "Good morning, sir. What can I get for you today?" she asked, holding the pad to take his order. He glanced up from his tablet, barely acknowledging her. "Black coffee, large, and make it quick," he said, his tone brisk but not rude. She nodded and jotted down the order. As she stepped back toward the counter, she noticed something on the tablet he had set beside his cup. A spreadsheet, it seemed, filled with numbers and charts, and she could see that he had typed something incorrectly. It was subtle, a small miscalculation in one of the totals, but she recognized it immediately. She hesitated for a moment. Usually, she wouldn't interfere in a customer's work, but something told her that if she didn't speak up, it might cost him more than just money. It could lead to an embarrassing mistake in front of others. Taking a deep breath, she returned to the table. "Excuse me, sir," she said politely. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I think there might be a small error in that total on your spreadsheet." The CEO looked up sharply, his brow furrowing. "I'm busy." "Are you sure?" There was a hint of irritation in his voice, but also a spark of curiosity. "Yes," she said calmly, pointing to the screen. "It looks like one of the numbers was added twice. I could show you exactly where if you want." He blinked at her for a moment, caught off guard. Most people would have stayed quiet, afraid to correct someone of his stature, but here she was, confident and clear. He leaned back in his chair, studying her for a second before his lips twitched into what might have been the start of a smile. "All right," he said finally, setting the tablet aside. "Show me." She knelt slightly, keeping her tone respectful, yet firm, and pointed to the row where the error had occurred. "See, this number here was counted twice, so your total is slightly off. If you adjust it, everything should be correct." He nodded slowly, examining the correction. "You're right," he said after a moment. "I didn't catch that. Thank you." She smiled, glad to help but trying not to make a big deal out of it. "No problem at all. It happens to the best of us." He returned to his tablet, making the correction, and she stepped back to give him space. The cafe continued to bustle around them, but she noticed him watching her for a brief moment, as if measuring her carefully. It wasn't just about the correction. It was about how she handled it. Calm, polite, confident. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that by someone outside his corporate circle, and it seemed to intrigue him. She moved on to the next table, taking orders, serving drinks, and keeping an eye on the floor. She couldn't help but notice that he wasn't as absorbed in his work anymore. His posture had shifted slightly, more relaxed, and every so often he glanced around the room in a way that suggested he was taking note of things he hadn't noticed before. The morning continued, with customers coming and going, orders piling up, and the rhythm of the cafe never slowing. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that this interaction had changed something. The CEO had returned to his spreadsheet. Yes, but there was a subtle energy in the air now. a sense that a small momentous single correction could ripple out into something much larger. She felt a quiet thrill at having made a difference. Even in such a small way, her shift moved forward, each table presenting its own challenges. There was a mother trying to calm a fussy toddler, a young couple laughing over pancakes, a businessman arguing over his order with a fellow customer. She handled each situation with patience and professionalism, but her mind kept drifting back to the man by the window. He was quiet now, almost contemplative, and she wondered what was going through his mind. He had a presence that could fill a room, yet in that moment, he seemed almost human, vulnerable to a simple mistake as the morning rush began to slow. She wiped down tables, refilled condiments, and prepared for the next wave of customers. The cafe had a rhythm that she loved, a mixture of chaos and order, noise and laughter. And somewhere in that rhythm, she realized she had left an impression. Not because she sought recognition, but because she had acted with honesty and clarity. Qualities that could not be ignored, no matter how high someone's position by the time the rush ended. The cafe had returned to a quieter hum. She stacked chairs, refilled napkin holders, and prepared for the lunch crowd. The man by the window was still there, now sipping a second cup of coffee, his tablet closed, staring out at the street. She caught his eye briefly and he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it felt significant. A silent acknowledgement of what had passed, and perhaps of what was to come. She moved on with her work, serving customers and managing orders. But there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Something had shifted in the course of an ordinary morning. A simple act of attentiveness, a willingness to speak up, had created a moment that neither of them would forget. And while she didn't know it yet, small act was the beginning of a chain of events that would take her far beyond the cafe floor, into a world she had never imagined. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the tables. She took a deep breath, feeling the energy of the day, the buzz of the cafe, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Little did she know, the moment she had corrected that mistake was only the first step in a journey that would change everything for both of them. The CEO had noticed her, and that notice would not fade quickly. Her attention to detail, her calm confidence, and her human approach to a simple problem had planted a seed that would grow in ways neither of them could yet see. She continued her work, unaware of the eyes that followed her every move, a quiet curiosity building in the man she had helped. The cafe, with all its noise and bustle, seemed to fade into the background as a new story began to unfold, one that would bridge the ordinary and the extraordinary. All starting from a single, small act of honesty and courage. The afternoon had settled into a quieter rhythm. With the early rush fading into a steady flow of customers, the waitress moved between tables, delivering plates and drinks with ease. The clatter of utensils, soft hum of conversation, and the occasional laughter created a familiar background, one that she had grown used to over the years. But her mind kept drifting back to the man in the suit, the CEO who had noticed her small correction that morning. She wondered what kind of person he really was behind this serious exterior, and why he had taken the time to acknowledge her. She refilled a customer's water glass and smiled politely as they thanked her. Life went on around her, busy and ordinary, yet there was a subtle tension she couldn't shake. It was unusual for someone so powerful to notice a waitress, let alone be intrigued by her confidence. The thought made her feel a mixture of pride and unease. She had done what anyone would have done if they were observant and careful. Yet this moment seemed to have created a ripple in the otherwise predictable flow of her day. Meanwhile, across the cafe, the CEO leaned back in his chair. His hands folded over the tablet that had earlier revealed his mistake. He was not one to easily admit errors, but her calm correction had sparked an unusual sense of respect. Most people in his life, whether colleagues or subordinates, would have hesitated to speak up. Her courage and clarity stood out. He found himself studying her, watching how she interacted with others, how she moved around the room, and how she treated the customers. There was a sense of authenticity in her actions, a genuine care that was hard to find in the world of corporate power. After a few minutes, he signaled to his assistant, who had been waiting discreetly nearby, He asked the assistant to find out more about the young woman who had corrected him so confidently. The assistant gave him a curious glance, as if wondering why this minor interaction mattered so much. But he simply nodded and repeated his request. Something about her had caught his attention, and he couldn't ignore it. He returned to his coffee, his mind wandering between the tasks of the day and thoughts of the waitress, who had disrupted the usual flow of his morning. The waitress continued her work, tending to tables and keeping the cafe in order. She didn't notice anything unusual at first. Customers were friendly, some leaving generous tips, others in a rush and barely acknowledging her presence. Yet there was a subtle shift in the energy of the room. The CEO was observing more than he had initially let on, and it created an awareness in her that she didn't fully understand. Something was about to happen. She could feel it in the quiet hum of the cafe, though she tried not to dwell on it too much. A few moments later, a young man in a suit approached her. He introduced himself as the assistant of the CEO who had been sitting by the window. He explained politely that his boss had noticed her attentiveness and would like to speak with her for a moment. The waitress felt a flutter of surprise and nervousness. This was highly unusual, and while she had always been confident in her abilities, being called to speak with a powerful businessman was not something she had ever expected. She paused, considering whether to follow him. The assistant smiled reassuringly, sensing her hesitation. "It won't take long, and it's nothing formal," he said. "He just wants to ask you a few questions." Taking a deep breath, she nodded. "All right," she said. "I'll go." She followed him across the cafe, past the hum of the afternoon crowd, and into a small waiting area near the front entrance. The assistant asked her to wait for a moment while he informed the CEO. She sat down, her hands folded neatly in her lap, trying to keep her mind calm. Her heart beat faster than usual, but she reminded herself that she had nothing to be afraid of. She had done nothing wrong. She had simply noticed a small error and spoken up. That was all. Within minutes, the assistant returned, gesturing for her to follow. She walked into the area where the CEO waited, a large office-like space that gave the impression of professionalism and authority. He stood as she entered, offering a polite nod and a small smile. "Thank you for coming over," he said. "I wanted to personally thank you for catching that mistake this morning. Not many people would have the courage to speak up, and I wanted to acknowledge that." She smiled politely, feeling a mix of pride and humility. It was no problem at all. "I just noticed it and thought I should mention it," she said. Her tone was calm, respectful, yet honest. He gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk. "I have to say, your observation and approach were impressive. It's rare to find someone who not only notices the details, but also communicates them in a way that is respectful and constructive. Most people either hesitate to speak up or do so in a way that is confrontational." She listened, feeling both honored and slightly uneasy. It wasn't every day that a powerful businessman took the time to analyze her actions and speak about them in such a manner. She nodded, unsure of what to say, but appreciating the recognition. He continued, leaning back in his chair. "I'd like to understand a little more about you. What motivates you? How do you approach challenges?" The waitress paused, thinking carefully before answering. "I try to pay attention to the details and do my best in whatever I'm doing. I believe in honesty and treating people with respect. I like to solve problems when I notice them, rather than wait for someone else to handle them." The CEO smiled, clearly impressed by her straightforward answer. That's exactly the kind of mindset that can make a real difference, whether in a business or anywhere else. You have an instinct that most people in leadership positions spend years trying to develop. They spoke for several minutes, discussing small examples from her work, her perspective on problem solving, and her observations about people and situations. She found herself relaxing as the conversation progressed. He was curious, yes, but also genuinely interested in understanding her approach and thought process. It was unusual for someone of his stature to engage in such a conversation without an agenda or expectation. She felt seen in a way she hadn't experienced before. As their discussion continued, she realized that the CEO was testing more than her knowledge. He was testing her perspective, her ability to think clearly under observation, and her willingness to stay calm and grounded. She answered each question honestly, drawing from her everyday experiences and the lessons she had learned from interacting with countless people in the cafe. Eventually, the CEO leaned back, nodding appreciatively. You have a sharp mind and a clear approach to challenges. I can see why you noticed that mistake this morning while others did not. It's a rare quality, and it doesn't go unnoticed. The waitress felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of validation she hadn't expected. She had never sought recognition from someone like him. But it felt good to know that her careful attention and confidence had made an impression. He paused, studying her for a moment. I think it would be worthwhile for us to explore how your skills and mindset could be applied beyond the cafe. Not everyone has the ability to observe, understand, and communicate effectively. It's a talent that can open doors if nurtured. She blinked, unsure how to respond. The idea of stepping beyond the world she knew was both exciting and intimidating. She had never imagined that a simple act of attentiveness could lead to such an opportunity. Yet, as she looked at him, she felt a quiet curiosity stirring inside her. Perhaps there was more to her potential than she had realized. The conversation ended with a polite thank you from both sides. She left the office feeling a mix of exhilaration and uncertainty, walking back through the cafe with a new awareness. Customers and colleagues were still busy with their routines, but she felt a shift within herself. Something had changed, and though she couldn't yet predict what lay ahead, she knew that this moment was the start of a journey that could take her far beyond the familiar confines of the cafe floor. As she resumed her duties, delivering coffee and refilling plates, she carried with her a newfound sense of confidence. She had stepped into an unexpected situation and handled it with grace and clarity. The CEO's acknowledgement lingered in her mind, reminding her that sometimes small acts of courage and attention could create opportunities that were impossible to anticipate. The rest of the day went on, but she could feel the subtle energy of possibility, as if the ordinary world around her was quietly giving way to something extraordinary. The sun outside began to dip lower, casting longer shadows across the tables. She paused briefly by the window, glancing at the CEO's table. He had left, but the impression he had made on her, and she on him, was already taking root. The afternoon continued, with the clatter of dishes and the murmur of conversation. But a sense of anticipation hung in the air. A new chapter had begun, sparked by a single act of courage and honesty. And both of them would be changed because of it. The next morning, the cafe was filled with the usual rush of people. The smell of freshly baked bread and rich coffee filled the air, mingling with laughter and chatter. The waitress moved quickly between tables, taking orders, refilling drinks, and keeping the floor tidy. She had learned to move with a rhythm that made even the busiest days feel manageable. But her mind kept drifting back to the conversation she had had with the CEO the day before. It was unexpected and left her with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She adjusted her apron and smiled at a regular customer as she passed by. The ordinary tasks felt different somehow, as if the world around her had shifted slightly. She had always been aware of her surroundings, but now she noticed details with more intent, thinking about how small actions could create bigger impacts. Her eyes caught movement near the door, and she looked up to see the CEO walking in. He moved with the same composed, confident air as before. Yet there was a sense of purpose in his steps that she could not ignore. She approached him, a professional smile in place. "Good morning, sir." "The usual?" she asked. He shook his head slightly, placing his briefcase down. "Actually, I'd like to speak with you again, if you have a moment," he said. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she nodded. "Of course," she replied, motioning for him to follow her. To a quieter corner of the cafe, they settled into a small seating area away from the main floor. The CEO placed his briefcase beside him and leaned forward slightly, his eyes attentive. "I wanted to continue our conversation from yesterday," he began. "I've been thinking about how you handled that mistake, and I realize there's more to it than just attention to detail. There's an instinct, a way of seeing things others miss, and I think that could be valuable in other settings." The waitress listened carefully, unsure of where this was heading, but intrigued. "I appreciate that," she said softly. "I just try to pay attention and do my best." He smiled. "And that's exactly why I wanted to speak with you. I'd like to invite you to my office. Nothing formal, nothing intimidating. I just want to show you a different perspective. How decisions are made at a higher level and how someone like you could contribute with the skills you already have." She blinked, taken aback. It was an offer she never expected. Visiting a CEO's office was far beyond her usual life, and the thought was both exciting and intimidating. "I don't know what to say," she admitted, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "Say yes," he replied with a gentle smile. "It's just an opportunity to observe and learn. Nothing more at this stage." After a moment of thought, she nodded. "All right," she said, her curiosity outweighing her apprehension. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervous anticipation. Wondering what she would encounter in a corporate office, he stood and motioned toward the door. "Excellent. Let's go." They exited the cafe and walked down the busy street. The city moved around them, people hurrying to work, taxis honking, and street vendors calling out. She noticed the contrast between the bustling streets and the composed demeanor of the CEO, who moved with a sense of purpose and calm. It was inspiring in a way, showing her that control and focus could exist even in chaos. When they arrived at his office building, the receptionist greeted them politely, and they took the elevator up to the top floor. The office was spacious, modern, and meticulously organized. Large windows allowed sunlight to pour in, casting a warm glow over the sleek furniture and polished surfaces. She felt a mixture of awe and nervousness as she looked around, realizing how different this world was from the cafe she called her own. The CEO led her to his office, gesturing for her to sit. He took a seat across from her and placed his briefcase on the floor. "Welcome," he said. "I thought it would be good for you to see where decisions are made and how a few details can have a significant impact." He opened his laptop and displayed a series of documents and reports. In the business world, numbers, schedules, and plans can sometimes seem overwhelming, but every detail matters. Just like you noticed that mistake yesterday, catching small errors here can prevent much larger problems. She leaned forward, intrigued by the way he explained things. He wasn't just showing her numbers or charts. He was giving her a glimpse into a mindset, a way of thinking that relied on observation, clarity, and decision-making. It was different from anything she had experienced, and she found herself paying close attention, asking questions. And learning from his explanations, he explained the flow of decisions in a company, how teams worked together, and how leaders relied on people who could spot inconsistencies, patterns, or potential problems. A person like you, someone who notices and acts, can be incredibly valuable. It's not just about intelligence or experience. It's about awareness and courage, he said. She nodded, absorbing every word. She realized that her everyday experiences at the cafe, managing customers, noticing small errors, communicating effectively, were actually training her in ways she had never considered. Her instincts, honed over years of interacting with people, were skills that could be applied in new and meaningful ways. As their conversation continued, he shared stories from his own career challenges he had faced, mistakes he had made, and lessons he had learned. She listened closely, fascinated by the human side of someone she had only known as a figure of authority. His stories were not just about business. They were about observation, decision-making, and learning from every experience. He paused, looking at her thoughtfully. "I think you have potential that extends beyond what you might see in yourself right now. It's rare to find someone with your combination of attentiveness, clarity, and humility. Most people either overlook details or overestimate their importance, but you seem to have a balance. That balance is powerful." The waitress felt a warm sense of validation. She had always worked hard, paying attention to details, trying to do her best. But she had never considered that these everyday skills could be recognized at a level so far removed from her usual environment. It was both surprising and encouraging, giving her a glimpse of possibilities she had never imagined. He leaned back slightly, smiling. "I'm not offering you a job or a position yet. This is simply an opportunity to see, learn, and understand how a different world operates. Observation is the first step to understanding, and understanding opens doors. She took a deep breath, feeling both nervous and excited. "Thank you," she said softly. "I appreciate the opportunity." They continued talking for some time, exploring scenarios, discussing the importance of perspective, and examining the impact of small actions in large systems. She asked questions, shared her observations, and engaged in a way that surprised even her. The conversation flowed naturally, bridging the gap between two very different worlds, the cafe and the corporate office, through shared curiosity and human insight. Eventually, the CEO glanced at the clock. "I think that's enough for today. You've done well to follow along and ask thoughtful questions. Most people would have been overwhelmed or distracted, but you stayed focused. That focus is valuable, and it's something you should recognize in yourself." She smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. The experience had been enlightening, stretching her understanding and opening her eyes to possibilities she had never considered. Walking back to the cafe, she reflected on the conversation, realizing that her instincts honed through everyday challenges were more significant than she had imagined. Back at the cafe, the afternoon crowd had begun to settle in. She returned to her duties, serving customers and keeping the floor in order, but there was a quiet energy within her. The day had started as any other, yet it had led to an experience that would shape her perspective for years to come. Small actions, courage, and attention to detail had brought her into a world she had never dreamed of. And she knew that this was only the beginning of a journey filled with potential, learning, and unexpected opportunities. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the tables, she looked around the cafe with a renewed sense of purpose. Every interaction, every detail, and every choice mattered. And somewhere, far beyond the familiar walls of the cafe, the CEO had seen something remarkable. In her, a potential that could change the course of her life if she was willing to embrace it. The following morning arrived with a golden sunlight spilling across the streets, bringing the city to life. The cafe was already bustling when she stepped inside, tying her apron with her usual practiced ease. Her mind was still replaying the previous day's visit to the CEO's office. She felt a strange mix of excitement and nervousness, a sense that something important had begun, though she wasn't quite sure what it was as she served the first customers. Her eyes scanned the room, taking in the familiar chaos. Yet there was a subtle difference in how she approached her work. Each order, each interaction, she handled with a sharper awareness, reflecting on what she had learned. Observation, attention to detail, patience, and courage, these weren't just lessons from the cafe anymore. They were skills that mattered in a wider world, a world she was slowly beginning to glimpse. The door opened, and the CEO entered again, this time with a briefcase and a calm, steady gaze. He nodded at her as he approached the counter, his presence commanding attention even in the midst of the morning rush. She felt her heart beat faster, yet she kept her composure. Moving forward with professionalism, he gestured toward a quieter corner. "Shall we continue our discussion?" he asked, his tone warm but businesslike. She nodded, following him to the seating area. Sitting down across from him, she noticed a new sense of formality. Yet there was an underlying comfort in the familiarity of their previous conversation. "I'm curious to learn more about the work you do and how decisions are made at your level," she said, her voice steady. He smiled, clearly appreciating her engagement. "That's exactly what I want to show you today. It's one thing to notice mistakes or offer corrections, but it's another to understand the impact of decisions and how leadership shapes outcomes. You've already demonstrated observation and courage. Now, I'd like to introduce you to how those skills apply in a broader context." He opened his laptop, displaying charts, graphs, and reports. She leaned in, studying the data, trying to make sense of the numbers and connections. He explained each section with patience, breaking down complex ideas into simple, understandable concepts. Every decision here affects multiple teams, clients, and stakeholders. Attention to detail is critical, but so is understanding the bigger picture, he said. She listened intently, asking questions and noting the relationships between decisions and outcomes. It was overwhelming at times, but she was fascinated. The The concepts were new, yet she found parallels with her work at the cafe. Managing customers, timing orders, and resolving conflicts required similar skills, just applied in a different environment. She realized that the same principles, care, observation, and communication were universally important. He leaned back, watching her absorb the information. You see, it's not just about numbers or reports. It's about people, process, and perspective. The ability to notice, interpret, and act is invaluable. And you've shown that instinct naturally. She smiled a little shyly. I never thought about it that way. I just try to do my best every day. That's why you're here, he replied. Potential is recognized not only in accomplishments but in attitude, awareness, and consistency. You're already showing that. They spent the next hour discussing various scenarios and case studies. He illustrated challenges he had faced, mistakes made, and solutions found. She asked questions, shared her thoughts, and engaged with curiosity. Each exchange reinforced her understanding of the importance of observation, decision-making, and foresight. At one point, he paused and looked at her thoughtfully. Have you ever considered how your daily decisions, though seemingly small, prepare you for much larger responsibilities? Your role here, your interactions with people, and your attention to details are foundational skills. They are the same skills that leaders use every day. She realized he was right. She had often underestimated the value of her everyday work, thinking it was ordinary and routine. But in this moment, she could see the significance of what she did and how those skills could translate into a larger world. She felt a surge of confidence and motivation. He closed the laptop and leaned forward slightly. I want you to understand that success isn't about being the loudest or the most aggressive. It's about observation, integrity, and applying your insight wisely. The courage to act, even in small matters, sets you apart. The conversation turned toward her aspirations. She shared her dreams, cautious but honest. He listened carefully, nodding, offering guidance and encouragement. The dialogue was both enlightening and empowering, opening her eyes to possibilities she had never considered. She began to see a path beyond the cafe, a way to use her skills in meaningful and impactful ways. As the morning progressed, the CEO asked her to participate in a small exercise. He presented a hypothetical scenario involving a project with multiple teams and conflicting priorities. She was asked to identify potential issues and suggest solutions. She approached it with focus. Drawing on her experience and the lessons she had learned in the cafe and from their conversations, her suggestions were thoughtful, practical, and insightful. He nodded in approval. Exactly, this is the kind of thinking that makes a difference. You've applied your skills naturally, yet with awareness and consideration. This is what I was hoping to show you, how everyday abilities can be leveraged in a larger context. She felt a mix of pride and humility. The exercise had challenged her, yet she realized that she was capable of more than she had imagined. The CEO's guidance and encouragement had illuminated a path. She felt energized by the possibilities ahead. They concluded the visit with a discussion about growth, observation, and learning. He emphasized the importance of continuous improvement, of paying attention to details while understanding the bigger picture, and of acting with integrity and confidence. She left his office with a sense of accomplishment, clearer understanding of her potential, and a renewed sense of purpose. Walking back to the cafe, she felt the energy of the day differently. Each task, each customer, each interaction now carried a deeper significance. She understood that the skills she honed daily, patience, attentiveness, communication, and courage, were not limited to her current environment. They were tools she could use to create opportunities, influence outcomes, and make a meaningful impact. The afternoon continued, and she resumed her duties with a quiet determination. The cafe was still bustling, but she moved through it with a sense of clarity and purpose. Each small action felt intentional. Each interaction a chance to apply what she had learned. She realized that change didn't have to be sudden or dramatic. It could begin with small steps, consistent attention, thoughtful decisions. As the sun began to set, casting warm light across the tables, she paused for a moment to reflect. She had entered the CEO's world briefly and in doing so, had gained a perspective that would shape her future. She understood that growth required observation, courage, and the willingness to step beyond comfort zones. And she knew that the lessons she had learned would guide her, not just in the corporate world, but in every aspect of life. The cafe, with its familiar chaos and hum, felt different now. She had seen a glimpse of a larger world, and she carried that vision within her. She knew the journey ahead would be challenging, but also full of possibility. Every detail, every decision, every moment mattered, and she was ready to embrace the next chapter with awareness, courage, and determination. The experience had not only broadened her perspective, but had instilled a quiet confidence of belief that she could navigate challenges, make a difference, and grow beyond what she had ever imagined. The morning light streamed through the windows of the cafe, creating a warm glow that seemed to brighten even the busiest corners. The waitress moved quickly through the space, her energy steady and purposeful. She had grown used to the rhythm of the cafe, but recently everything had felt different. The visit to the CEO's office, the conversations, and the small lessons she had absorbed were on her mind constantly. Each task now carried a sense of significance beyond what she had experienced before. Customers filed in, placing their orders, chatting with friends, and exchanging smiles with the staff. She greeted each person warmly, refilled drinks, and managed the flow of the morning rush with a calm efficiency. Yet, underneath her professional composure, her mind replayed the journey of the past few days. The lessons about observation, courage, and clarity had become a part of her thinking, subtly influencing every decision she made. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. The CEO walked in, his presence unmistakable even amid the morning crowd. He nodded at her, a silent acknowledgement that they both recognized, and made his way to a quiet corner of the cafe. She felt a familiar mix of nervousness and curiosity. This was a continuation, a step further into a story that had already begun with a simple act of noticing a small mistake. After a moment, he approached her. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said politely. "I wanted to speak with you again and discuss something important." She nodded, following him to the seating area he had chosen. "Of course," she replied, her voice steady. She was curious, eager to learn, but also aware that this conversation might mark a turning point in her life. He gestured for her to sit. "I've been thinking about the skills you demonstrated: attention to detail, courage, and clarity, and how rare they are. They're not just useful in your current environment. They can open doors in ways most people never imagine." She listened carefully, her mind absorbing every word. "I appreciate that," she said softly. "I never thought my work here would mean that much." He smiled. "It's often the everyday skills, the habits we take for granted, that create the biggest impact. The way you observe, respond, and communicate sets you apart. And I think it's time to explore how those skills can take you further." Her heart beat faster. She had anticipated learning and observing, but the thought of taking action, stepping beyond her familiar world, brought a mix of excitement and apprehension. "What do you mean exactly?" she asked. "I'd like to offer you a mentorship opportunity," he explained. "Nothing formal to start with, but a chance to understand the business world. Learn decision-making at a higher level, and see how someone with your skills can contribute meaningfully. You'll observe, ask questions, and gradually participate. It's a chance to grow, not just professionally, but in perspective and confidence." She felt a wave of surprise and gratitude. The idea of stepping into a world so different from her own was both thrilling and intimidating. I would like that," she said after a moment. "Thank you for considering me." He nodded, a satisfied smile on his face. "Good. It's a journey, and it starts with observation and learning. You'll see that even small actions, when applied thoughtfully, can have significant consequences. The courage to speak up, the attention to detail, and the ability to communicate effectively are all skills that will serve you well here." Over the next few hours, they began a series of discussions and exercises designed to expand her understanding. He introduced her to project workflows, problem-solving scenarios, and examples of leadership challenges. She observed carefully, asked questions, and contributed insights drawn from her own experiences. Each session revealed new perspectives, showing her how skills she had honed in the cafe could translate to larger, more complex environments. The CEO explained the importance of perspective and foresight. Most people focus on immediate tasks, but leadership requires understanding how decisions affect multiple areas over time. It's about connecting the dots, predicting outcomes, and acting with awareness. You've already demonstrated the ability to do this on a small scale, and now you'll see how it applies broadly. She nodded, absorbing each lesson. The connection between her current work and these new challenges became increasingly clear. Her experiences at the cafe, managing customers, observing details, solving small problems, had built a foundation of skills that could now be expanded and refined. She felt empowered, realizing that her everyday efforts had value far beyond what she had imagined. As the day progressed, she participated in mock projects, discussed decision-making strategies, and learned about communication and leadership in a corporate setting. The CEO encouraged her to think critically, ask questions, and reflect on each scenario. She discovered strengths she hadn't recognized in herself, and developed confidence in her ability to contribute meaningfully. Between exercises, they spoke about her aspirations, her challenges, and her observations about people and processes. He listened attentively, offering guidance, encouragement, and insights drawn from his own experiences. The conversation was both practical and inspiring, helping her see a path forward while reinforcing the importance of integrity, focus, and clarity. By mid-afternoon, the sessions were drawing to a close. The CEO looked at her with a thoughtful expression. "You've shown remarkable adaptability and insight. I think it's time to explore how you can begin contributing more directly. There are opportunities to assist on smaller projects, gradually increasing responsibility as you gain experience. It's a chance to bridge your current skills with new challenges." She felt a surge of excitement and determination. The idea of stepping into new responsibilities was daunting, yet she was ready to embrace it. "I'd like that very much," she said. "I want to learn and do my best." He nodded, pleased. "Good. Remember, this is a journey. You'll make mistakes, but each one is a lesson. Observation, courage, and clarity will guide you. And the skills you've already demonstrated will serve as a strong foundation." They concluded the day with a final discussion about growth, learning, and perspective. He emphasized that success was not just about formal education or titles, but about the ability to observe, act thoughtfully, and communicate effectively. These qualities, she realized, were present in her daily life, and now they had the potential to shape her future in meaningful ways. Walking back to the cafe, she felt a quiet confidence growing inside her. Each step was infused with a sense of purpose and anticipation. She had glimpsed a new world, one filled with opportunities and challenges, and she knew that her skills, courage, and attention to detail would guide her along the path. She returned to her work with renewed energy, serving customers, managing tasks, and observing every detail with intention. The cafe, bustling as always, felt both familiar and transformed. She moved through it with a new awareness, understanding that every interaction, every decision, and every action mattered. Her work had taken on deeper meaning, and she approached it with a combination of dedication and insight. As the sun set, casting a warm glow across the tables, she paused for a moment, reflecting on the journey she had undertaken. From noticing a small mistake to stepping into a world she had never imagined, she had discovered the power of observation, courage, and clarity. The experience had opened doors, not just to new opportunities, but to a deeper understanding of herself and her potential. She knew that the journey was only beginning. Challenges would come, decisions would need to be made, and mistakes would be inevitable. Yet she felt ready. She had the skills, the mindset, and the guidance to navigate whatever lay ahead. Her life, once defined by routine and predictability, was now infused with possibility and purpose. As the cafe emptied and the evening settled in, she finished her shift with a sense of fulfillment. She had grown, learned, and begun a journey that would shape her future in ways she could not yet fully see. And in that moment, she understood that the courage to notice, the willingness to speak up, the dedication to doing one's best were not just small acts, They were the seeds of transformation, capable of opening doors to a world of extraordinary potential. The morning sun painted the city in warm gold as she arrived at the cafe, her mind alive with anticipation. The previous days had been extraordinary, filled with lessons, challenges, and new perspectives. Today felt different, charged with possibility. She tied her apron and took a deep breath, feeling a quiet confidence that had grown steadily since her first encounter with the CEO. The rhythm of the cafe, once ordinary, now seemed intertwined with a larger journey she was beginning to understand. Customers began to arrive, each with their unique moods, requests, and stories. She greeted them warmly, balancing efficiency with attentiveness, noticing the smallest details and responding thoughtfully. Each interaction was an opportunity to apply what she had learned about observation, patience, and communication. Her actions were natural and seamless, yet infused with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. Mid-morning, the CEO arrived once again, this time inviting her to accompany him on a small visit to a project site he was overseeing. The idea thrilled her, blending curiosity with the nervous excitement of stepping into a world she had only recently glimpsed. She followed him outside, the city bustling around them, a reminder of the contrast between her familiar cafe life and the corporate and professional environment she was now exploring. The project site was busy, with teams coordinating, equipment moving, and tasks being managed simultaneously. She observed carefully, noting how the CEO communicated with his team, delegated responsibilities, and solved problems on the spot. It was fascinating to see how attention to detail, clarity of instruction, and patience could transform chaos into organized progress. She realized that the skills she had honed at the cafe, observation, communication, and swift decision-making, were more relevant than ever as they walked through the site. The CEO paused to explain the process, sharing insights about strategy, risk assessment, and the importance of clear communication. He asked her questions about what she observed, challenging her to identify potential issues and suggest solutions. She responded thoughtfully, drawing on both her cafe experience and the lessons she had learned in their discussions. Her observations were practical and insightful, earning him a nod of approval. "You see," he said as they paused by a busy section of the site, "the ability to notice small details and act on them is what makes the difference between a smooth operation and chaos. You demonstrated that skill back at the cafe, and now you're seeing it applied on a larger scale." She nodded, absorbing the lesson. It was more than just work. It was about understanding systems, people, and the impact of decisions. Every action, no matter how small, had consequences that rippled outward. She realized that her courage to speak up and her attention to detail were not just personal strengths, they were skills with far-reaching impact. Throughout the day, she engaged with different teams, asking questions and learning from their experiences. She observed how leadership, patience, and communication created an environment where mistakes could be corrected and improvements could be made. She saw parallels with her own life and work, understanding that growth came from both experience and reflection. During a break, the CEO spoke with her privately. "I've been impressed by how quickly you're adapting and applying what you've learned. Not everyone can translate observation and insight into practical solutions, but you are doing it naturally. That's rare, and it will serve you well as you grow." She felt a surge of gratitude and motivation. His acknowledgement was not just praise, it was recognition of her potential and a reminder that her skills, honed through everyday experiences, had value far beyond what she had imagined. "Thank you," she said. "I'm learning so much, and I want to keep improving." He smiled. "And you will. This is only the beginning. The important thing is to remain curious, observant, and willing to act when needed. Those qualities will open doors you haven't even seen yet." The rest of the afternoon was spent exploring different aspects of the project, analyzing workflows, observing team dynamics, and identifying areas for improvement. Each interaction reinforced the lessons she had been absorbing: communication, attentiveness, patience, and courage. She realized that leadership was not about authority alone. It was about understanding, empathy, and the ability to guide others thoughtfully. As the day drew to a close, they returned to the cafe. She resumed her duties with renewed energy and perspective. Every order she took, every interaction she had, carried the awareness she had gained. Customers noticed her attentiveness, responding with smiles and appreciation. Colleagues began to pick up on subtle changes in how she handled challenges, her calm demeanor and focused approach setting a positive tone. In the evening, the cafe quieted down, and she took a moment to reflect. The journey from noticing a small mistake to engaging in high-level observation and learning had transformed her understanding of herself and her potential. She saw clearly now that growth was not about sudden leaps, but about consistent, thoughtful action and the courage to engage with challenges as they arose. The CEO's mentorship had given her more than knowledge. It had given her confidence, perspective, and a vision of what she could achieve. She understood that every skill she had developed, every act of attentiveness and courage could be applied in ways she had never imagined. Her world had expanded, and with it, her sense of possibility as the cafe emptied and the evening light faded. She finished her shift with a deep sense of fulfillment. She had learned to see connections, understand impact, and approach tasks with intentionality. She knew that challenges lay ahead, but she was prepared. Her skills, experiences, and growing confidence equipped her to navigate whatever came next. She stepped outside, the cool evening air brushing against her face, and looked at the city around her. Lights twinkled, people moved with purpose, and the world felt alive with possibility. She felt a quiet determination, a readiness to embrace opportunities and face challenges with clarity and courage. The journey that began with a simple act of noticing a mistake had grown into something transformative, shaping her future in ways she had only just begun to understand. With a final deep breath, she walked toward her home, carrying with her the lessons of courage, attentiveness, and growth. She understood now that ordinary actions, when combined with insight and determination, could lead to extraordinary outcomes. And she knew that this was only the beginning, an opening chapter in a story that would continue to unfold, filled with learning, opportunity, and the quiet power of human.